The moment Willow Kane placed her first tentative step onto the weathered wooden porch of the Lucky Strike saloon, she knew her life in Redemption Creek would never be the same. The year was 1878, and the Montana Territory was as unforgiving as it was beautiful, much like the gaze of the tall cowboy who caught her eye across the dusty main street, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. Willow had arrived in Redemption Creek just 2 days prior, clutching nothing but a small valise, the last of her savings, and a letter from her late aunt offering her a position as a seamstress. After the fever took both her parents in Chicago, the promise of work and a fresh start in the West seemed like divine providence. But Providence, as Willow was quickly learning, worked in mysterious ways. "Miss Kane?" A sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "I asked if you're coming inside, or if you plan to decorate my porch all day." Madame Rosalie, the owner of the Lucky Strike, stood in the doorway with her hands on her hips. She was an imposing woman in her 40s, with copper hair piled high and a dress that showed more of her bosom than Willow had ever seen displayed in public. "Forgive me," Willow said, stepping forward with determination. "I'm here about the position." Madame Rosalie's critical eye swept over Willow's plain travel dress and simple bonnet. "You don't look like much, but then again, neither did I when I started. Come in, girl, before you catch flies in that open mouth of yours." The inside of the Lucky Strike was dimly lit despite the early afternoon sun. The scent of whiskey, perfume, and stale smoke hung heavy in the air. A few men sat at tables playing cards, while a piano player idly tapped out a tune in the corner. What caught Willow's attention, however, were the women dressed in vibrant satins and silks, with painted lips and bright feathers in their hair. "Ladies," Madame Rosalie called out, "this is Willow Kane. She's our new seamstress." A few of the women nodded in greeting, but most barely glanced her way. Willow followed Madame Rosalie to a small room at the back of the establishment, trying not to stare at the grand staircase that led to the upper floor. "Your aunt spoke highly of your skills," Madame Rosalie said, closing the door behind them. "God rest her soul." Mabel was the finest seamstress in 3 territories. "Thank you," Willow replied, grateful for the kind words about Aunt Mabel. "I learned everything from her." "Then let's hope you learned well." Madame Rosalie gestured to a pile of colorful fabrics in the corner. "Those need mending by tomorrow. The girls are hard on their costumes. You'll have a room upstairs, last door on the right, away from the business rooms." She fixed Willow with a serious look. "You're here to sew, Miss Kane. Nothing more. I run a respectable establishment for the entertainments it provides, but I don't force any woman to work against her nature. Understood?" Willow nodded, relieved. "Yes, madam." "Good. You'll take your meals with us and receive $5 a week, plus room and board." Madame Rosalie moved toward the door. "One more thing, the girls might try to befriend you, but remember, they're competing for the attention of every man with a penny to his name. Don't get caught in their games." With that warning, Madame Rosalie left, and Willow sank onto the small stool next to the work table. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was a start. At 20 years old, she'd already survived worse. Picking up a torn emerald dress, Willow threaded a needle and began to sew. That evening, as Willow organized her meager belongings in her new room, the saloon below came alive. The piano music grew louder, accompanied by the raucous laughter of men and the theatrical giggles of women. Curious, she crept down the back stairs and peered around the corner into the main room. The Lucky Strike had transformed. Lanterns bathed the room in a golden glow, the bar was crowded with thirsty patrons, and the dance hall girls twirled among the tables, charming the men out of their hard-earned money. They were selling dances, drinks, and smiles, nothing more, at least not on the main floor, but even that seemed to be making Madame Rosalie a small fortune. "First night, huh?" A voice beside her made Willow jump. A girl about her age stood there, dressed in a purple satin dress with black lace trim. Her blonde hair fell in ringlets around a pretty face that looked too young for its heavy rouge. "I'm Pearl," she said, offering a warm smile. "You must be the new seamstress." "Willow," she replied, extending her hand. "Pleased to meet you." Pearl laughed, taking Willow's hand. "So formal. You're not in Chicago anymore, honey." She turned toward the crowded room. "See those men over there? The ones with the gold dust pouches? They're fresh from a claim up near Broken Ridge. That's who we're all after tonight." Willow followed Pearl's gaze to a group of rough-looking men who were indeed being swarmed by several of the dance hall girls. All except one, a lean, dark-haired cowboy who sat slightly apart, nursing a whiskey. "What about him?" Willow asked. Pearl's smile faded slightly. "That's Vaughn Vance. He's got the richest claim in the territory, but he hardly spends a dime. Just comes in once a month, has one drink, watches the girls, and leaves." She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Madam says he's saving to buy a ranch down south. Word is he's got more gold than the bank, but he's tighter with it than bark on a tree." As if sensing their discussion, the man Vaughn looked up. His eyes found Willow's across the room, and for a moment, neither looked away. He had a weathered face that spoke of long days under the sun, but his eyes held an intelligence that belied his rough exterior. "Don't waste your time," Pearl advised, misreading Willow's interest. "Ruby's been trying to get his attention for months. So has Lily. And Diamond. And—" "I get the idea," Willow interrupted, breaking eye contact with the mysterious cowboy. "I'm not interested anyway. I'm just here to sew." Pearl patted her arm sympathetically. "That's what I said when I first came to be the kitchen girl. Now look at me." She adjusted her bodice. "I've got to get back. Those miners won't charm themselves out of their gold." As Pearl sashayed away, Willow found herself looking back at Vaughn Vance. He was still watching her, his expression unreadable. Feeling suddenly self-conscious in her plain dress, Willow retreated to her room, but not before she saw Ruby, a striking redhead in a crimson gown, slide into the chair beside him. The next morning, Willow woke to the sounds of the saloon being cleaned. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where several bleary-eyed dance hall girls were having coffee. "Morning, seamstress," called Diamond, a tall woman with silver blonde hair. "Heard any bed springs creaking last night?" The other girls laughed. "Leave her be," Pearl said, sliding a cup of coffee toward Willow. "She's not used to our ways yet." Willow accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you. Don't mention it." Pearl leaned closer. "How are those dresses coming?" "Mine has a tear right across the already fixed," Willow assured her. "All the dresses will be ready by noon." "You're an angel," Pearl declared, drawing more laughter from the girls. "Speaking of angels," Diamond said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "Ruby tried everything short of heavenly intervention to get Vaughn Vance to spend some of that gold on her last night." "Any luck?" asked Lily, a petite brunette with large brown eyes. Diamond shook her head. "Not a penny more than his usual $1 for a whiskey." Ruby entered the room just then, her red hair loose around her shoulders. She was older than the other girls, perhaps nearing 30, with a hardness around her eyes that all the makeup in the world couldn't disguise. "Discussing my business?" she asked coolly. The table fell silent. "Just wondering if you made any progress with our favorite tight-fisted miner," Diamond finally replied. Ruby's painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "All things come to those who wait. Vaughn Vance will spend his gold eventually, and when he does, it'll be on me." Her gaze shifted to Willow, assessing. "You're the new seamstress." "Yes," Willow replied evenly.
"I'm Willow Kane."
"Listen carefully, Willow Kane," Ruby said, her voice sweet but her eyes cold. "In this place, we all have our roles. Mine is to be the star that every man wants to reach. Yours is to make sure my costumes sparkle enough to keep their attention. Remember that, and we'll get along just fine." With that, Ruby swept out of the room, leaving a tense silence in her wake. "Don't mind her," Pearl said softly. "Ruby's been here the longest, and she's got her eye on Vance's gold. She thinks if she can get him to spend on her, she can convince him to take her away from all this." Willow nodded, understanding dawning. These women weren't just competing for nightly earnings, they were competing for a future, for the chance to escape the life they'd found themselves in. And Vaughn Vance, with his rumored fortune and his reluctance to spend it, represented the ultimate prize. As the weeks passed, Willow settled into a routine at the Lucky Strike. By day, she mended costumes, created new designs, and sometimes helped in the kitchen. By night, she occasionally watched from the shadows as the dance hall girls plied their trade, learning their techniques for extracting money from the patrons without crossing the lines Madame Rosalie had drawn. Vaughn Vance returned exactly 4 weeks after Willow first saw him. This time, she was prepared, having heard so much about the mysterious miner from the girls. He arrived as the evening was just beginning, the same serious expression on his face as he took his usual seat near the back. "He's here," Pearl hissed, poking her head into the sewing room where Willow was finishing a last-minute hem on Lily's dress. Ruby's already making her move. Curiosity got the better of Willow. "I'll be right there," she promised, quickly tying off her thread. When she emerged, she saw Ruby already perched on the arm of Vaughn's chair, leaning close to whisper something in his ear. He didn't seem particularly responsive, but he wasn't sending her away either. Across the room, Diamond and Lily watched with evident envy. Every month, the same dance, Pearl sighed beside her. He comes in, orders 1 whiskey, pays with $1, and lets Ruby fawn all over him without spending another cent. Why does he come at all? Willow wondered aloud. Pearl shrugged. Maybe he's lonely. Maybe he likes the attention without the cost. Or maybe he's just reminding himself what he's saving all that gold for. As they watched, Ruby ran a finger along Vaughn's jawline, her lips moving in what was surely a tempting offer. He shook his head, said something brief, and Ruby's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, laughing as if he'd said the most amusing thing in the world. "Turned her down again," Pearl whispered. "She'll be in a foul mood tomorrow." Willow was about to return to her work when Vaughn's eyes suddenly lifted, finding her across the room as if he'd known exactly where she was standing. For the second time, their gazes locked, and Willow felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. This time, she didn't look away immediately. Instead, she offered a small, polite nod of acknowledgement. To her surprise, Vaughn nodded back, the barest hint of a smile touching his lips. Ruby noticed the exchange and followed his gaze, her expression darkening when she saw Willow. With deliberate intent, she placed herself directly in Vaughn's line of sight, blocking Willow from view. "Oh my," Pearl breathed. "You've done it now." "Done what?" Willow asked, genuinely confused. I just nodded. "Honey, that man hasn't given any woman in this place a second glance in the year he's been coming here." Pearl's eyes were wide with amazement. "And he just smiled at you." "Don't be ridiculous," Willow said, feeling her cheeks warm. "It was just common courtesy." But Pearl was already shaking her head. In a place like this, there's no such thing as just anything. Ruby's marked him as hers, and you just stepped into her territory. Before Willow could protest further, Madame Rosalie appeared beside them. "Miss Kane," she said briskly, "if you're done with your evening snooping, there's a tear in Diamond's blue dress that needs immediate attention." "Yes, madam," Willow replied, grateful for the excuse to retreat. As she made her way back to her sewing room, she felt eyes on her back. Whether they belonged to Vaughn Vance or Ruby, she couldn't be sure, but the sensation lingered long after she closed the door. The following morning, Willow was surprised to find a small package outside her door. Inside was a piece of fine Belgian lace, rare and expensive in this remote territory, with a note that simply read, "For your sewing box." There was no signature, but Willow had her suspicions. Her instinct was confirmed when Pearl cornered her in the kitchen. "He asked about you," Pearl said without preamble. "After you left." Willow nearly dropped the cup she was holding. Who? Who do you think?" "Vaughn Vance." Pearl's eyes sparkled with excitement. "He asked Madame Rosalie who the new girl was." "Not a dancer," he said. "The one with the kind eyes." Willow's heart skipped. "What did Madame tell him?" "Just that you're the seamstress." But Ruby overheard, and she is livid. Pearl glanced around to make sure they were alone. "Be careful, Willow. Ruby plays rough when she feels threatened." Willow thought about the beautiful lace. "I think he left something at my door."
Pearl's jaw dropped.
"He was here? This morning?" "No, I don't know when it was delivered. But there was a piece of lace." Willow hesitated, then decided to show Pearl. She retrieved the package and displayed the delicate fabric.
Pearl gasped.
"Do you know what this is worth out here? More than what I make in a month of dancing." She looked at Willow with new respect. "He's courting you, and he hasn't even spoken to you yet." "That's absurd," Willow protested. "He doesn't know me." "He knows enough," Pearl insisted. "And that's how it starts." A man sees something in a woman that speaks to him, something beyond the paint and the feathers and the forced laughter. That's rare, Willow. Don't dismiss it. Willow carefully returned the lace to its wrapping. "Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, what am I supposed to do about it? I can't exactly go mining for him." Pearl laughed. "No, but you could say thank you next time he comes in." She patted Willow's hand. "Just be yourself." That's clearly what caught his eye in the first place. Throughout the day, Willow found her thoughts returning to Vaughn Vance. She knew almost nothing about him, except what the girls had told her, that he had a successful gold claim, that he was saving his money, that he rarely spent on anything frivolous. And now, apparently, that he had noticed her. The lace sat in her sewing box, too fine to use on the dance hall costumes, too precious to waste on ordinary mending. Willow found herself touching it occasionally, wondering about the man who would give such a gift to a woman he hadn't even spoken to. That evening, as she was helping to prepare the saloon for opening, the front door swung open. Willow looked up, startled to see Vaughn Vance standing there, hours before his usual monthly visit would be due. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His eyes found Willow immediately, and he moved toward her with purpose. "Miss Kane," he said, his voice deeper than she had imagined, with a slight southern drawl. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Mr. Vance," she replied, conscious of the other girls watching from various corners of the room. "The saloon will be opening soon." He nodded, a half-smile playing at his lips. "I'm not here for the saloon." His eyes held hers steadily. "I came to see if you received my gift." Willow felt a blush creep up her neck. "I did. It's beautiful. Far too generous for a simple thank you." "A thank you?" He looked confused. "For what?" "I assumed it was because I fixed your shirt," Willow explained. Several weeks earlier, she had mended a torn sleeve for one of the regulars. She'd assumed it had been passed along to Vaughn. He shook his head, amusement in his eyes. "I haven't had a shirt mended in years, Miss Kane. The lace was because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because when I saw you, you smiled. Not at me, just in general." It was the first genuine smile I've seen in this place, and it reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Willow was speechless. "I apologize if I've embarrassed you," Vaughn continued. "That wasn't my intention. I only wanted to." He trailed off, suddenly looking unsure of himself. "To what, Mr. Vance?" Willow prompted gently. "To see that smile again," he admitted. Despite herself, Willow felt her lips curve upward. "Like this?" His own smile broadened in response. "Exactly like that." From the corner of her eye, Willow could see Ruby entering from the back room, stopping dead in her tracks at the sight of Vaughn standing there talking to the seamstress. "Would you permit me to call on you properly?" Vaughn asked, seemingly oblivious to the audience they'd attracted. "Not here. Perhaps a walk on Sunday afternoon." Before Willow could respond, Ruby appeared at Vaughn's elbow. "Vaughn Vance," she purred, sliding her arm through his. "What a delightful surprise to see you off schedule. Have you finally decided to spend some of that gold you've been hoarding?" Vaughn disentangled himself from Ruby's grip with polite firmness. "Miss Ruby," he acknowledged, "I'm afraid I'm not here for entertainment tonight." Ruby's smile tightened. "No? Then what brings Montana's most elusive bachelor to our humble establishment on a Tuesday evening?" "I was just asking Miss Kane if she would accompany me for a walk this Sunday," he said evenly. Ruby's eyes narrowed as they flicked between Vaughn and Willow.
How?
Unexpected. She turned to Willow, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You do know that Mr. Vance here is famous for never spending his money? The dance hall girls have a running bet on who can get him to open his purse strings. So far, not even I have succeeded." She laughed, the sound brittle. "Good luck getting even a ribbon from him, dear." Willow felt a flash of indignation on Vaughn's behalf. "I don't require payment for my company, Miss Ruby," she said calmly. "And yes, Mr. Vance, I would be pleased to walk with you on Sunday." Something like relief passed across Vaughn's face. 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, Willow confirmed. Ruby's painted smile never wavered, but her eyes had turned to ice. "How charming! Our little seamstress moving up in the world." She looked at Vaughn. "Just remember, darling, when you want a real woman's company, I'm still here. And I promise I'm worth every nugget." With that, she sauntered away, hips swaying provocatively. "I should go," Vaughn said, clearly uncomfortable with the scene. "I've caused enough disruption." "You haven't," Willow assured him. "But perhaps it would be best if we continue our conversation on Sunday." He nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "Until Sunday, Miss Kane." As he walked out, Willow became acutely aware of the stares from around the room. Pearl gave her a discreet thumbs up from behind the bar, while Diamond and Lily whispered furiously to each other. Madame Rosalie, watching from the staircase, merely raised an eyebrow before disappearing upstairs. That night, as the saloon filled with its usual patrons, Willow kept to her sewing room. She had expected some backlash from Ruby, but nothing prepared her for what happened just after midnight. Ruby burst into the sewing room, clearly intoxicated, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "You think you're special?" she demanded, swaying slightly. "You think he sees something in you that he doesn't see in me?" Willow set aside the dress she was mending. "Ruby, I don't want any trouble." "Too late for that," Ruby spat. "I've been working on Vaughn Vance for a year." "A year? Do you know what that's worth? He's the richest prospector in the territory, and when he finally decides to spend his fortune, it's supposed to be on me." "I don't think, of course you don't," Ruby interrupted. "You don't think about what it means for girls like us when a man like that walks in. You don't think about the years I've put in, the things I've endured, all while saving enough to eventually get out of this life." To Willow's surprise, Ruby's eyes filled with tears. "He was my ticket," she whispered. "My one chance." Willow stood, moving cautiously toward the distraught woman.
"Ruby, I'm sorry."
"I didn't realize." "Don't." Ruby held up a hand. "Don't pretend you care. Just know this: men like Vaughn Vance don't marry dance hall girls or seamstresses. They might dally with us. They might even convince themselves it's love for a time. But in the end, they go back to their own kind." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Enjoy your walk on Sunday. But remember what I said: when he breaks your heart." After Ruby left, Willow sat back down, her hands trembling slightly. She had never intended to come between Ruby and Vaughn. She hadn't even known there was anything to come between. But Ruby's words had struck a nerve. What did she really know about Vaughn Vance? What did he want from her? And more troubling still, what did she want from him? Sunday arrived clear and warm, a perfect early summer day. Willow had spent the intervening days fielding curious questions from the other girls and avoiding Ruby, who had retreated into a cold silence that was somehow more unnerving than her outburst. Madame Rosalie had summoned Willow to her private sitting room the morning after Ruby's confrontation. "I don't interfere in my girls' personal affairs," she had said, pouring them each a small glass of sherry, "as long as it doesn't affect business." "I understand," Willow had replied. "I never meant to cause any trouble." "Trouble finds its way regardless of intentions," Madame had said with a wry smile. "Vaughn Vance is well respected in these parts. Honest, hard-working. Keeps to himself mostly. The girls see him as a prize because of his claim, but there's more to the man than his gold." She had fixed Willow with a penetrating look. "Just as there's more to you than your needle and thread." Now, as Willow prepared for her walk, she recalled Madame's words. She chose her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her hair in a modest style that still allowed a few curls to frame her face. At precisely 3 o'clock, Vaughn arrived at the back entrance of the Lucky Strike, looking far different from the rough miner who frequented the saloon. He had shaved, his dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a clean shirt and string tie beneath his usual leather vest. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Miss Kane," he greeted her, his eyes warming appreciatively. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Vance," she replied. "You're looking quite distinguished yourself." He offered his arm, which she took, conscious of Pearl watching from an upstairs window with an encouraging smile. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, following a path that led away from the main street toward a small creek that ran behind the town. "I should apologize for the other night," Vaughn finally said. "I didn't mean to put you in an awkward position with the other ladies." "It's forgotten," Willow assured him, though Ruby's tearful face was still vivid in her memory. "Though I confess I'm curious why you chose to single me out. We hadn't even spoken before." Vaughn considered the question as they approached the bank of the creek, where a large cottonwood provided shade. "Would you like to sit?" he asked, gesturing to a fallen log. Once they were settled, he handed her the package he'd been carrying. "Perhaps this will help explain." Intrigued, Willow unwrapped the paper to find a small, leather-bound book. Opening it, she discovered it was filled with pressed flowers, each labeled with a date and location. "My mother started this," Vaughn explained. "She loved wildflowers. Said they were God's way of painting the wilderness. After she passed, I continued adding to it wherever I traveled." He gently turned a few pages. "This was the last one she pressed herself, a prairie rose from our homestead in Texas." Willow touched the delicate pressed petals with reverence. "It's beautiful, but I don't understand." "The first time I saw you," Vaughn continued, "you reminded me of her, not in looks, but in spirit." She had the same kind of smile that lit up from within. He looked slightly embarrassed. "I know it sounds foolish." "Not foolish at all," Willow said softly, deeply moved by the personal nature of his gift. "Thank you for sharing this with me." "There's something else," Vaughn said, reaching into his vest pocket. He pulled out a pressed flower that Willow recognized as a bluebell, similar to ones that grew near the creek where they sat. "I found this the day after I first saw you." It seemed like a sign. Willow felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer sun. "Mr. Vance, Vaughn," he corrected gently. "Please." "Vaughn," she amended, testing the feel of his name. "I'm honored by your thoughtfulness, but I have to ask. The girls at the Lucky Strike believe you have a fortune in gold that you're saving. They think—" She hesitated, not wanting to offend him. "They think I'm a miser," he finished for her, a rueful smile playing at his lips. "That I come to the saloon just to torment them by not spending my money." Willow nodded, relieved he wasn't upset by the question. "I do have a claim," Vaughn acknowledged. "A good one." And I am saving. That much is true. He looked out over the creek, his expression growing serious. My father lost everything gambling and drinking, left my mother and me with nothing but debts when he died. She worked herself to the bone to keep us fed. When she passed, I promised myself I'd never be like him, throwing money away on temporary pleasures. He turned back to Willow. I go to the Lucky Strike once a month to remind myself of that promise. To prove I can resist the temptations that ruined him. Then why spend even $1? Willow asked. Vaughn chuckled. Madame Rosalie runs a business, not a charity. The dollar is for the privilege of sitting in her establishment. It seemed fair. And what are you saving for? Willow ventured. The girls say you want to buy a ranch. I do, he confirmed. There's a spread down near the Yellowstone River. Good water rights, plenty of grazing land. The owner's willing to sell, but the price is steep. His eyes took on a faraway look. I've always loved working with horses. Mining is just a means to an end. They talked for hours, the afternoon slipping away as they shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their disappointments. Willow told him about losing her parents, about learning to sew from her aunt, about her journey west. Vaughn spoke of his time in the cavalry during the final years of the war, his wanderings afterward, and his discovery of gold in a stream not unlike the one beside them. As the sun began to set, Vaughn reluctantly suggested they head back. I've kept you far too long, he apologized. Madame Rosalie will think I've kidnapped her seamstress. I've enjoyed every minute, Willow assured him, realizing it was true. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so at ease with anyone, let alone a man she barely knew. They walked back toward town, their pace deliberately slow, neither wanting the afternoon to end. May I see you again? Vaughn asked as they approached the Lucky Strike. Perhaps next Sunday? I'd like that, Willow replied, her heart lighter than it had been in months. As they reached the back door, Vaughn hesitated, then gently took her hand in his. Thank you for today, Willow. The sound of her name on his lips sent a pleasant shiver through her. Thank you for the walk. And for sharing your mother's book with me. He pressed a chaste kiss to her knuckles. Until next Sunday. Willow watched him walk away, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched. Only when he disappeared around the corner did she turn to enter the saloon, coming face to face with Ruby. Enjoy your stroll? Ruby asked, her voice deceptively sweet. He's quite the gentleman, isn't he? So respectful. So restrained. Ruby, save it. Ruby cut her off. I saw everything from upstairs. The hand-holding, the longing looks. Very touching. Her expression hardened. But let me tell you something about men like Vaughn Vance. They might play the gentleman with girls like you, but eventually they want what men always want. And when that happens, his precious savings won't seem so important anymore. She leaned closer, her breath sour with whiskey. When he's ready to spend his gold, he'll come looking for experience, not innocence. Remember that. Ruby brushed past her into the alley, leaving Willow shaken. Despite the lovely afternoon, Ruby's words planted a seed of doubt. What if she was right? What if Vaughn's interest in her was just a different kind of game? But then Willow remembered the genuine emotion in his eyes when he spoke of his mother, the way his hand had trembled slightly when he showed her the pressed bluebell, the respect with which he'd treated her all afternoon. No, she decided.
Ruby was wrong about him.
She had to be. Over the next few weeks, Sundays became sacred to Willow. Each week, Vaughn would arrive at 3 o'clock, sometimes with a small gift or ribbon, a book of poetry, once even a piece of hard candy that he'd bought from a traveling peddler. They would walk, talk, and gradually, their hands would find each other, fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. Willow learned that Vaughn had been mining for 3 years, that his claim was a day's ride from town, that he came in monthly to purchase supplies and deposit his findings in the bank. He'd almost reached his goal for the ranch, needing perhaps another 6 months of good yields. In turn, Vaughn discovered Willow's love of Shakespeare. Her father had been a schoolteacher, her dream of someday having her own dress shop, and her skill with not just sewing but embroidery and lace making as well. Their fifth Sunday together, Vaughn brought a picnic basket filled with bread, cheese, and early summer berries. They sat beneath their cottonwood by the creek, watching the water flow as they ate. "I've been thinking," Vaughn said, his voice unusually hesitant, "about the ranch." "What about it?" Willow asked, savoring a particularly sweet raspberry. "It's a big place for one person." He glanced at her, then away. "Too big, really." Willow's heart began to beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. "I suppose it would be. I thought perhaps." He cleared his throat. "That is, I wondered if you would consider." "Vaughn," she said gently, placing her hand over his. "Ask me." He met her eyes then, his own filled with a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "Would you consider coming with me, Willow? When I buy the ranch? As my wife?" Though she had sensed the direction of his thoughts, hearing the actual proposal still took her breath away. "Vaughn, we've only known each other for a few weeks." "I know," he acknowledged, "and I know how it must sound. But I also know what I feel." He turned his hand to hold hers properly. "I've never met anyone like you, Willow. Never felt this way before. When I'm not with you, I'm thinking about you. When I am with you, everything else fades away." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in silk. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks, waiting for the courage to ask." Unfolding the silk, he revealed a simple gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. "It's not fancy," he said apologetically, "but it's real gold from my claim, and the pearl reminded me of how you shine even in this rough place." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes. "It's beautiful." "You don't have to answer now," Vaughn assured her. "I know it's sudden. I know there are things to consider. I just wanted you to know my intentions are honorable and my feelings are true." Willow looked at the ring, then at the earnest face of the man holding it. In the few weeks she'd known him, he'd shown her more genuine care and respect than she'd experienced since losing her parents. What's more, she'd found herself thinking about him constantly, looking forward to their Sundays with an anticipation that bordered on physical ache. Was it love? It was too soon to be certain. But it felt like the beginning of something real, something lasting. "I don't need more time," she said softly. "Yes, Vaughn. I'll marry you." His face transformed with joy. With slightly trembling hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into an embrace. When his lips found hers, Willow knew she'd made the right decision. His kiss was tender, respectful, yet filled with a passion that promised deeper intimacy to come. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Vaughn rested his forehead against hers. "I'll make you happy, Willow. I swear it." "I know you will," she whispered back. "And I'll do the same for you." That evening, as they walked back to the Lucky Strike hand in hand, Willow was too caught up in her happiness to notice the figure watching from the shadows. Ruby, her face twisted with bitterness as she observed the newly engaged couple's obvious joy. Breaking the news to Madame Rosalie proved easier than Willow had anticipated. The older woman listened to Willow's breathless account of Vaughn's proposal, examined the ring, and then nodded with something like satisfaction. "I thought he might be headed in that direction," she said. "He came to see me last week, you know." Willow's eyes widened. "He did? Why?" "To ask about your situation here. Wanted to know if you had a contract, if there would be any impediments to your leaving." Madame Rosalie smiled at Willow's surprise. "He's thorough, your Mr. Vance. Wanted to make sure everything was proper." "And what did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're free to go whenever you choose." She patted Willow's hand. "Though I'll be sorry to lose such a fine seamstress." "Thank you," Willow said, impulsively hugging the older woman. "For everything." Madame Rosalie returned the hug briefly before pulling back with her usual brisk manner. Yes, well, you're not gone yet. There's still Ruby's new costume to finish before you run off to marital bliss. The mention of Ruby dampened Willow's joy slightly. Have you seen her this evening? I'd like to tell her myself. Madame Rosalie's expression grew serious. Ruby left this afternoon. Said she had business in Helena and might be gone a few days. She hesitated. Willow, be careful. Ruby doesn't take disappointment well. What could she possibly do? Willow asked. Vaughn has made his choice. Just watch yourself, Madame advised. Now, when's the wedding to be? Vaughn thinks another 3 months at the claim should give him enough for the ranch, Willow explained. We'll marry then, before heading south. 3 months, Madame repeated thoughtfully. Time enough for a proper dress, at least. Consider it my wedding gift. Overwhelmed by the gesture, Willow could only nod her thanks. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the small community of Redemption Creek. Most reactions were positive. Vaughn was well respected, and Willow, though a newcomer, had earned a reputation for honesty and hard work. There were a few raised eyebrows at the match between a prosperous miner and a saloon seamstress, but such pairings weren't unheard of in the territories, where women were scarce and social boundaries more fluid than back east. Pearl was ecstatic, planning a small celebration for the following Sunday when Vaughn came for his usual visit. Diamond offered to teach Willow a few wifely skills, with a wink that made her blush furiously. Even Lily, who had harbored her own mild interest in Vaughn, came to offer sincere congratulations. The only shadow on Willow's happiness was Ruby's continued absence. 3 days stretched into a week with no word from the dance hall girl. Madame Rosalie seemed unconcerned, saying only that Ruby often took off when the mood struck her, but Willow couldn't shake a sense of unease. Vaughn returned to his claim the day after the proposal, needing to continue work if they were to meet their timeline, but promised to be back the following Sunday. In his absence, Willow threw herself into her sewing, started planning her wedding dress, and daydreamed about the life that awaited her as Mrs. Vaughn Vance. She was so absorbed in these pleasant thoughts that she failed to notice the increasing tension among some of the townspeople. It wasn't until Pearl burst into the sewing room on Saturday afternoon, her face pale, that Willow realized something was wrong. Willow, Pearl gasped, clearly having run all the way. You need to come quickly. There's trouble at the assay office. What kind of trouble? Willow asked, setting aside the lace she'd been working on for her dress. It's Vaughn, Pearl said, her voice trembling. They're saying he salted his claim that the gold he's been bringing in isn't really his. Willow stared at her friend in disbelief. That's ridiculous. Vaughn would never cheat anyone. I know that, Pearl agreed. But Ruby's back, and she's telling anyone who'll listen that she has proof. She says he showed her where he was getting the gold, and it wasn't from his claim at all. A cold dread settled in Willow's stomach. Where is he now? At the sheriff's office, Pearl replied. They're holding him until they can investigate. Willow was on her feet instantly, grabbing her shawl. Take me there. They hurried through the streets of Redemption Creek, drawing curious stares from passers-by. As they approached the sheriff's office, Willow could see a small crowd had gathered outside. Among them stood Ruby, her red hair unmistakable even from a distance. Pushing through the onlookers, Willow confronted her. What have you done? Ruby turned, a triumphant smile playing at her lips. Why, Willow Kane. Come to support your fiancé in his time of trouble? How loyal. Whatever you've told them is a lie, Willow said firmly. Vaughn is an honest man. Is he? Ruby raised an eyebrow. Then perhaps you can explain why he's been depositing more gold than his claim could possibly produce. Or why he refuses to let anyone see where he's mining. She leaned closer. Or why he suddenly decided to marry a nobody seamstress right when questions were being raised about his activities. Willow felt as if she'd been slapped. What are you talking about? Ruby's smile widened. Oh, you didn't know? The bank's been suspicious for months. Your precious Vaughn has been bringing in twice the gold that a claim his size should yield. They were just waiting for proof before they acted. And you provided this proof? Willow asked, her voice shaking with anger. I merely confirmed what they already suspected, Ruby said with a shrug. After all, I've known Vaughn much longer than you have. Been to his claim multiple times. Seen things that would make your innocent heart break. Before Willow could respond, the door to the sheriff's office opened, and Vaughn emerged, flanked by Sheriff Taylor and Mr. Jameson from the bank. His wrists were free, he wasn't under arrest, at least not yet, but his face was grim. When he saw Willow, a mix of emotions crossed his features: relief, shame, concern. Willow, he said, moving toward her. You shouldn't be here. Of course I should, she replied, taking his hand defiantly. These accusations are absurd. Sheriff Taylor, a weathered man in his 50s with a reputation for fairness, addressed the crowd. Folks, there's been no determination of wrongdoing yet. Mr. Vance has agreed to take us to his claim tomorrow so we can verify its production. Until then, I suggest you all go about your business. Ruby pushed forward. Sheriff, are you really going to let him walk free? He could run before morning. Where would I run to? Vaughn asked tiredly. Everything I've worked for is here. Mr. Vance has posted bond and given his word he'll appear tomorrow, the sheriff said firmly. That's good enough for me. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Willow squeezed Vaughn's hand. Let's go somewhere we can talk. They walked in silence to their spot by the creek, neither speaking until they were seated beneath the cottonwood tree. It's not true, Vaughn said immediately. None of it. I know, Willow assured him. You don't have to convince me. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Ruby showed up at my claim 3 days ago. Said she wanted to talk, to clear the air about us. I shouldn't have let her stay, but she seemed sincere. Said she was happy for us. He shook his head. I should have known better. What happened? Nothing, at first. She looked around, asked questions about the mining operation. I answered, not thinking anything of it. Then she started asking about yields, about how much gold I was getting.
His jaw tightened.
When I wouldn't give specific amounts, she got angry, said I was hiding something. And then, she left. Or I thought she did. Must have doubled back after I went to sleep. He looked at Willow, his eyes troubled. The next morning, I found some of my tools moved, some of my samples disturbed. Didn't think much of it at the time. Now I realized she was setting me up. Willow frowned. But how could she prove you were cheating if you weren't? She doesn't have to prove it, Vaughn explained. She just has to cast enough doubt. Make people question where my gold is coming from. He sighed heavily. In a mining town, accusations like this can ruin a man, even if they're eventually proven false. But tomorrow, when the sheriff sees your claim, that's just it, Vaughn interrupted. My claim is good, but it's not spectacular. The reason I've been able to save so much is that I live simply and work harder than most. I don't drink away my earnings or lose them at cards. He looked away. But it's also because I found a second deposit, a smaller one, about half a mile from my registered claim. Willow's heart sank. And you didn't register it? I was going to, he insisted, after I'd worked it enough to buy the ranch. Claim jumping is a serious offense, but this wasn't that the land wasn't claimed by anyone else. I just didn't file the proper papers.
He took her hands.
It was wrong, I know that. But I wasn't stealing from anyone, just bending the rules a bit. Willow absorbed this information, her mind racing. Did you tell the sheriff this? Yes, Vaughn nodded. He's willing to give me the benefit of the doubt, says if the second deposit is unclaimed as I say, I can register it now and pay a fine.
But
what? But Ruby is claiming I showed her a different site altogether. Says I've been stealing from the Blackwood Mining Company's land. His expression darkened. That's a hanging offense, Willow. Fear clutched at her heart. She's lying. Of course she is, he agreed. But Blackwood has influence. If they decide to pursue this, they won't, Willow said with more confidence than she felt. The truth will come out tomorrow when you show the sheriff both sides. Vaughn squeezed her hands. I'm sorry to have brought this trouble on us, just when everything was looking so bright. Don't apologize, she told him firmly. We'll face this together. He searched her face. You're not. You don't regret your answer? Now that you know I'm not as honest as you thought. Willow reached up to touch his cheek. You made a mistake, Vaughn. That doesn't change who you are or how I feel about you. Relief washed over his features. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her as if she might disappear. I don't deserve you, he murmured against her hair. Yes, you do, she whispered back. And tomorrow, we'll prove it to everyone. That night, Willow could barely sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind filled with worries about what the next day might bring. Would the sheriff believe Vaughn? Would Ruby's lies hold any weight? What if the Blackwood Company decided to make an example of him? She rose before dawn, dressing quickly in her most practical outfit, a simple skirt and shirtwaist that would allow her to ride if necessary. She had convinced Vaughn to let her accompany the group to his claim, despite his concerns for her comfort. If they're going to judge you, she had insisted, I want to be there to see it done fairly. She was just pinning up her hair when a soft knock sounded at her door. Opening it, she found Pearl, still in her nightdress, her face pale. What is it? Willow asked, immediately concerned. It's Vaughn, Pearl said, her voice barely above a whisper. He's gone. Gone, Willow repeated, not comprehending. What do you mean, gone? The sheriff just came by looking for him, Pearl explained. Said Vaughn never returned to the hotel last night after meeting with you. They found his horse still in the stable, but his saddlebags are missing. Willow shook her head in denial. That's impossible. He wouldn't leave. Not without telling me. The sheriff wants to talk to you, Pearl continued. He's downstairs with Madame Rosalie. In a daze, Willow followed Pearl to Madame's private parlor, where Sheriff Taylor stood with his hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable. Miss Kane, he greeted her. I'm sorry to disturb you so early, but I need to ask you about Mr. Vance. He wouldn't run, Willow said immediately. Whatever you're thinking, you're wrong. The sheriff exchanged a glance with Madame Rosalie. When did you last see him? Yesterday evening, by the creek, Willow replied. We talked about the accusations, about going to his claim today to prove them false. She twisted the ring on her finger. He was planning to meet me this morning. Did he say anything about other plans? Anyone he needed to see first? Willow thought back to their conversation. No, nothing like that. He was worried about the Blackwood Company getting involved, but he was prepared to face the consequences of not registering the second site. Sheriff Taylor nodded, seeming to weigh her words. The Blackwood Company is involved now. Their representative arrived on the late stage yesterday. He's the one who reported that Vance never returned to the hotel. A chill ran down Willow's spine. Who is this representative? A Mr. Hargrove, the sheriff replied. Says he's their head of security. Madame Rosalie spoke up. Willow, dear, did Vaughn mention any enemies? Anyone who might wish him harm? The implication hit Willow like a physical blow. You think something's happened to him? That he didn't run, he was. She couldn't finish the sentence. We don't know anything yet, Sheriff Taylor said quickly. But given the circumstances, we need to consider all possibilities. Ruby, Willow said suddenly. Have you spoken to Ruby this morning? The sheriff frowned. Miss Ruby left on the morning stage, according to the ticket agent. Said she had business in Helena. She's running, Willow declared. Because she knows whatever she's accused Vaughn of isn't true, and she doesn't want to be here when that's proven. Or she's afraid. Madame Rosalie suggested gently. If Vance did run, and she's the one who exposed him. He didn't run, Willow insisted. And Ruby isn't afraid of anything. She turned to the sheriff. I want to go to his claim.
Now.
Today. Sheriff Taylor shook his head. That's not possible, Miss Kane. It's a day's ride, and we don't know what we'd find even if we went. Then send someone, she pleaded. One of your deputies. Please. The sheriff considered her request. I'll send Deputy Collins out this morning. But, Miss Kane, I need you to prepare yourself. If Vance has fled, he hasn't, Willow interrupted. Something's wrong. I can feel it. After the sheriff left, promising to keep her informed, Madame Rosalie poured Willow a cup of strong coffee. Drink, she ordered. Then tell me everything Vaughn said yesterday. Willow recounted their conversation in detail, including Vaughn's admission about the second gold deposit. When she finished, Madame Rosalie looked thoughtful. This Blackwood representative Hargrove, did he arrive before or after Ruby made her accusations? I don't know, Willow admitted. Does it matter? Perhaps, Madame said. It seems convenient that a Blackwood man would be here just as accusations of claim jumping on their land surfaced. She drummed her fingers on the arm of her chair. And Ruby's sudden departure is equally suspicious. Hope flared in Willow's chest. You believe me? That Vaughn didn't run. I believe, Madame said carefully, that there are too many coincidences here for comfort. She stood abruptly. Get your shawl. We're going to pay a visit to this Mr. Hargrove. The Blackwood Company's representative had taken a room at the Grand Hotel, the only establishment in Redemption Creek that could claim any kind of luxury. Madame Rosalie, using her considerable influence as one of the town's most successful business owners, secured them an introduction. Elias Hargrove was a tall, lean man with cold eyes and a precisely trimmed beard. He received them in the hotel's small dining room, his manner polite but distant. Ladies, he greeted them. To what do I owe the pleasure? We understand you're here about Vaughn Vance, Madame Rosalie said, without preamble. Hargrove's expression didn't change. That's correct. Mr. Vance is suspected of stealing gold from Blackwood Company land. As head of security, it's my responsibility to investigate such matters. And how did you come to suspect Mr. Vance specifically? Madame pressed. We received information, Hargrove replied smoothly. The details are confidential, I'm afraid. From Ruby? Willow asked, unable to contain herself. A flicker of something surprise, perhaps crossed Hargrove's face before he controlled it. As I said, the source is confidential. But I assure you, the information was credible enough to warrant my presence here. How interesting, Madame Rosalie remarked, that you arrived so quickly after the accusation was made. Almost as if you were expecting it. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. I'm not sure what you're implying, madam. I'm not implying anything, Mr. Hargrove. Merely observing. She smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Tell me, how long have you known Ruby? I don't believe I mentioned knowing anyone by that name, Hargrove replied, his voice hardening. No, you didn't, Madame agreed. Yet you didn't ask who she was either. A tense silence fell over the table. I think, Hargrove finally said, standing, that this conversation has reached its conclusion. If you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to. Of course, Madame Rosalie rose as well, motioning for Willow to do the same. We won't take any more of your valuable time. I'm sure the sheriff will have questions of his own when he returns. Outside the hotel, Willow turned to Madame Rosalie. He knows Ruby. I could see it in his face when I mentioned her. Yes, Madame agreed. And he was unsettled by the question about timing. There's something not right here, Willow. What do we do now? Willow asked, desperate for action. Madame Rosalie's expression was grim. We wait for the deputy to return from Vaughn's claim. And we pray your instincts about Vaughn are correct. The waiting was unbearable. Willow tried to occupy herself with sewing, but her hands trembled too much for fine work. She paced her small room, ran through various scenarios in her mind, and prayed more fervently than she had since her parents' deaths. It was nearly midnight when Pearl burst into her room without knocking. "They're back," she gasped. "The deputy and Vaughn." Willow was on her feet instantly.
Vaughn?
"He's here? He's all right." Pearl's expression was troubled. "He's alive, but—" "Willow, he's been hurt. They're taking him to Doc Miller's now." Willow didn't wait to hear more. She ran downstairs and out into the street, not bothering with a shawl despite the cool night air. The doctor's office was only 2 blocks away, and she covered the distance at a near run. The small waiting room was crowded when she arrived. Sheriff Taylor stood talking with Deputy Collins, while Madame Rosalie sat in one of the hard wooden chairs. Mr. Jameson from the bank was there as well, looking concerned. "Where is he?" Willow demanded, her eyes searching for Vaughn. "Doc's with him now," Sheriff Taylor replied. "Miss Kane, you should prepare yourself. He's been badly beaten." Willow felt her knees weaken. Madame Rosalie was beside her instantly, guiding her to a chair. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Deputy Collins stepped forward. "Found him about a mile from his claim. He'd been ambushed, hit from behind, then worked over pretty good. Left for dead in a gully." The young deputy's face was grim. "If his dog hadn't been making such a racket, I might have missed him altogether." His dog. Willow hadn't known Vaughn had a dog. "Old Blue Heeler," Collins explained. "Loyal beast. Wouldn't leave his side, kept barking till I came to investigate." "Did Vaughn say who did this to him?" Madame Rosalie asked. The deputy exchanged a look with the sheriff.
"He was pretty out of it, madam.
But he managed to say one word clear enough: Blackwood." At that moment, the doctor's door opened, and Dr. Miller emerged, wiping his hands on a towel. "He's asking for Miss Kane," he said, his eyes finding Willow. She rose unsteadily. "How is he?" "He's taken a severe beating," Dr. Miller replied honestly. "2 broken ribs, a lot of bruising, possible concussion. But he's young and strong. With rest, he'll recover." Relief washed over Willow. "Can I see him now?" The doctor nodded. "Just for a few minutes."
"He needs rest."
Vaughn lay on the examination table, his face a mass of cuts and bruises, his left eye swollen shut. His chest was wrapped in bandages, and his right hand was splinted. Despite his injuries, his good eye lit up when he saw her. "Willow," he rasped. She moved to his side, carefully taking his uninjured hand. "I'm here. You're safe now." "They tried to kill me," he said, his voice weak but urgent. "Hargrove and 2 others. Jumped me as I was heading back to town." "Shoo," she soothed, tears threatening. "Don't try to talk too much." "Need to," he insisted. "Ruby set me up. She's working with Hargrove. They want my claim." Willow frowned. "Your claim?"
"But why?"
"If the Blackwood Company is as big as they say—" "Not just my claim," Vaughn explained, wincing with the effort of speaking. "The whole valley. There's more gold there than anyone knows. Blackwood's been buying up claims all around mine, but I wouldn't sell." He squeezed her hand weakly. "That's why Ruby got close to me. To convince me to sell. When that didn't work, they tried to discredit me instead. And when that looked like it might fail too, they tried to kill you." Willow finished, anger replacing her fear. Vaughn nodded slightly, then grimaced in pain. "My saddlebags. Did they find them?" "My ledger was in there, with all the records of my claims production. Proves I wasn't stealing." "I don't know," Willow admitted. "I'll ask the deputy." Before she could move, Sheriff Taylor entered the room, followed by Deputy Collins. "Mr. Vance," the sheriff said. "Good to see you awake. Think you're up to answering a few questions." Vaughn repeated his account of the ambush, naming Hargrove explicitly. He described how they'd taken his ledger, which would have proven the legitimacy of his gold production. "Said they were going to make it look like I'd run," Vaughn concluded. "Leave my horse at the station, take my bags. Make everyone think I'd skipped town rather than face the accusations." The sheriff's expression was grim. We found your horse tied behind the station, just as you said. No sign of your saddlebags, though. We need to arrest Hargrove, Deputy Collins said eagerly, before he can leave town. On what charge? Sheriff Taylor asked. We have Vance's word against his, and right now, Vance is still technically under suspicion himself. For what? Willow demanded. Surely you don't still believe he was stealing from Blackwood after they tried to kill him? It's not about what I believe, Miss Kane, the sheriff said patiently. It's about what I can prove in court. What about Ruby? Madame Rosalie asked from the doorway, where she'd been listening. If we can find her, get her to confess her part in this.
She's long gone, the sheriff sighed.
And even if we could find her, there's no guarantee she'd turn on Hargrove. A sudden thought struck Willow.
Wait.
Vaughn, you said there's gold in the valley? More than people realize? He nodded cautiously. A lot more. That's why I've been saving so hard. I know what that land is worth. And Blackwood wants it all, she continued, the pieces falling into place. They've been buying up claims around yours. But I wouldn't sell, Vaughn confirmed. My claim sits right in the middle of what they want. Willow turned to the sheriff. What if we could prove that Blackwood knew about this gold deposit all along? That they've been systematically acquiring the land around Vaughn's claim? Sheriff Taylor looked intrigued. That would give them motive, certainly. But how would we prove it? The bank, Willow said, inspiration striking. Mr. Jameson must have records of who's been buying claims in that area and when. The sheriff nodded slowly. And if those purchases accelerated recently, it would suggest they knew something others didn't, Madame Rosalie finished. Something worth killing for. I'll speak to Jameson, Sheriff Taylor decided. In the meantime, Collins, I want a guard on this door. No one sees Vance without my say-so. As the lawman departed, Willow turned back to Vaughn, who was watching her with a mix of pride and exhaustion. You should rest, she told him, gently brushing hair from his forehead. Stay with me? He asked, his good eye already drooping. Always, she promised, pulling a chair close to his bedside. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Mr. Jameson provided records showing that the Blackwood Mining Company had indeed been systematically purchasing claims around Vaughn's property, using various intermediaries to hide their intent. More damning still, a telegram arrived from the U.S. Marshal's office in Helena, revealing that Elias Hargrove was wanted for similar schemes in Colorado and Nevada. Armed with this evidence, Sheriff Taylor attempted to arrest Hargrove, only to discover he'd fled town during the night. A territory-wide alert was issued, and Ruby's name was added to the wanted list as an accomplice. Vaughn recovered slowly, but steadily under Willow's attentive care. Once he was well enough to be moved, she insisted he stay at the Lucky Strike, where she could look after him properly. Madame Rosalie, to everyone's surprise, offered her own private suite for his convalescence. The man nearly died defending what's rightfully his, she said when Willow thanked her. Besides, it's good business to be on the right side of the richest claim owner in the territory. As Vaughn's strength returned, so did his determination to secure their future. The Blackwood Company's scheme had been exposed, their reputation in the territory ruined, but the threat to Vaughn's claim remained as long as its true value was known. We need to move quickly, he told Willow one evening as they sat together in Madame's parlor. Buy the ranch now, before someone else tries to take what's mine. But your claim, I'll sell it, he said decisively. To someone honest. Take what we need for the ranch, and a comfortable start. The rest. He shrugged, then winced at the movement. The rest doesn't matter. What matters is us, our future. Willow studied his face, still bearing the fading marks of his ordeal. Are you sure? You've worked so hard. For what? He asked softly. Gold is just metal, Willow. It can't keep you warm at night or laugh with you in the morning. He took her hand, his touch gentle. I started saving for the ranch because I wanted roots, a home. But I realized while I was lying in that gully, thinking I might die, that you're my home now. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes. "I feel the same way." "Then let's not wait 3 more months," Vaughn said, his good eyes shining with purpose. "Let's get married now by the ranch and start our life together." "Now," Willow repeated, startled. "But you're still healing, and we haven't prepared. I'm well enough to stand before a preacher," he insisted. "And what preparations do we really need? You have your dress nearly finished. I have enough saved already. The owner of the Rocking W is eager to sell." He squeezed her hand. "Say yes, Willow. Let's not waste another day." Looking into his earnest face, Willow found she couldn't argue. The past weeks had shown her how quickly happiness could be threatened, how precious each day was. "Yes," she agreed, her heart full. "Let's get married now." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church on the edge of town. Willow wore the dress she'd been creating in secret, ivory satin with Belgian lace trim, the same lace Vaughn had given her what seemed a lifetime ago. Pearl stood as her maid of honor, while Mr. Jameson, who had become a staunch ally, served as Vaughn's best man. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, and Vaughn kissed her with surprising vigor for a man still recovering from broken ribs, Willow felt a joy so complete it brought fresh tears to her eyes. The reception was held at the Lucky Strike, which Madame Rosalie had closed to regular business for the occasion. The dance hall girls served as hostesses, charming the townsfolk who might normally have avoided the establishment. Even Sheriff Taylor attended, raising a glass to the couple who had helped expose a dangerous criminal enterprise. As the evening wore on, Vaughn drew Willow aside to a quiet corner. "Mrs. Vance," he said, clearly enjoying the sound of her new name. "I have something for you." From his pocket, he withdrew a small leather pouch. "A wedding gift," he explained, placing it in her palm. Inside, Willow found a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant shaped like a wildflower, a bluebell, like the one he'd pressed the day after they met. "It's beautiful," she breathed, touching the pendant reverently. "I had it made from the first gold I ever found," Vaughn told her. "Seemed fitting somehow. The beginning of one dream becoming part of the beginning of a greater one." As he fastened the necklace around her throat, his fingers lingering on her skin, Willow felt a shiver of anticipation for the night ahead there first, as husband and wife. "There's something else," Vaughn said, his voice low. "I received a telegram this morning. They caught Hargrove trying to cross into Canada." Relief washed over Willow. "And Ruby?" Vaughn shook his head. "No sign of her yet. But with Hargrove in custody, she's alone. Less dangerous." "I hope they find her," Willow said, surprising herself with the lack of malice in the wish. "Not for revenge, but because she needs to answer for what she did." "She will," Vaughn assured her. "Sooner or later, justice catches up to everyone." He smiled, tracing the line of her jaw with his fingertip. "But tonight isn't about Ruby or Hargrove or anything but us." Looking up into his face, seeing the love and desire there, Willow couldn't have agreed more. "Take me home, Mr. Vance," she whispered. "With pleasure, Mrs. Vance," he replied, leading her through the crowd of well-wishers toward the door and the future that awaited them. 3 days later, they left Redemption Creek bound for the Rocking W Ranch. The property, located in a lush valley near the Yellowstone River, was everything Vaughn had described: fertile grazing land, a sturdy main house, outbuildings in good repair, and most importantly, water rights that would see them through even the driest seasons. The previous owner, an aging widower eager to return east to live with his daughter, had left much of the furniture and all of the equipment, making the transition easier than they dared hope. There were even a few hands who stayed on, grateful for the steady employment Vaughn offered. Their first night in their new home, after a day of unpacking and organizing, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. Happy. Vaughn asked, his arm around Willow's shoulders. More than I ever thought possible, she replied honestly. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I want to show you something tomorrow.
A surprise.
Another one, she teased. You're spoiling me. That's the plan, he agreed with a grin. For the rest of our lives. The next morning, after breakfast, Vaughn saddled 2 horses. Willow, who had learned to ride during their courtship, mounted with growing confidence. They rode for about an hour, crossing a corner of their property that Willow hadn't yet seen. Eventually, they came to a small rise overlooking a meadow bursting with wildflowers. In the center stood a massive old cottonwood, its branches spreading wide to provide shade. A creek meandered nearby, the water clear and swift. It reminds me of our spot in Redemption Creek, Willow observed, dismounting. That's why I wanted you to see it, Vaughn said, joining her. I thought maybe someday. He hesitated, suddenly looking boyishly uncertain. Someday what? She prompted. Someday we might build a house here, he finished in a rush. For our family. Willow's heart swelled. Our family? Vaughn's face flushed slightly. I know we haven't talked much about children, but I always imagined having them. A boy with your kind eyes, a girl with your spirit. He took her hands. But only if that's what you want to. Willow stepped closer, wrapping her arms around his waist. I want that more than anything, she assured him. A family. With you. Here, under this tree, by this creek. He held her tight, his chin resting on top of her head. How many? He asked, the vibration of his voice pleasant against her cheek. 2, she decided. No, 3. Or maybe 4. She laughed. As many as God sees fit to give us. Vaughn's laugh joined hers. We'd better get started on that house then. And the children. The look in his eyes made her breath catch. Even after weeks as his wife, his desire for her still had the power to make her heart race. Well, she said, her voice deliberately light, the house might take some time, but we could start practicing for the children right now. His eyebrows rose. Here. She glanced around at the private meadow, the soft grass, the warm sun. Why not? There's no one for miles. The expression that crossed his face, surprise, followed quickly by heat, sent a thrill through her. In one swift movement, he pulled a blanket from his saddlebag and spread it in the shade of the cottonwood. Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice husky as he drew her down beside him. You continue to amaze me. Good, she replied, reaching up to bring his mouth to hers. I plan to keep doing that for the next 50 years or so. And there, in the meadow that would someday hold their family home, they celebrated the life they'd fought for and the love that had brought them together, a dance hall seamstress and a gold miner who had found in each other a treasure far more valuable than gold. 10 years later, Willow Vance stood on the porch of their home, watching her husband teach their eldest son to rope a calf in the corral. At 8, Victor was the image of his father, with the same determination and gentle heart. Their twin daughters, Violet and Valerie, 6 years old and inseparable, were helping gather eggs from the henhouse, their dark braids bouncing as they chattered. And little Rose, just 3, sat on a quilt beside Willow, carefully stringing beads on a leather cord. The Rocking W had prospered under Vaughn's management, growing from a modest ranch to one of the most successful in the territory. They ran cattle now, and bred horses that were sought after as far away as California. The house on the meadow had been built when the twins were born, a spacious, comfortable home that rang with children's laughter. As for Ruby, they had heard she'd been captured 2 years after the wedding, trying to run a similar scheme in Idaho. She was serving time in the territorial prison not for attempted murder, which couldn't be proven, but for fraud and conspiracy. Madame Rosalie still ran the Lucky Strike, though she'd modified it over the years to be more of a legitimate theater and less of a saloon as Redemption Creek grew more civilized. Pearl had married a shopkeeper and now ran a dress shop where Willow occasionally helped out, using the skills that had once been her livelihood. Life had been kind to the Vances. There had been hardships, of course a difficult birth with the twins that had nearly cost Willow her life, a bad drought 3 years back that threatened the herd, the normal struggles of building a life together. But through it all, their love had remained constant, growing deeper with each passing year. Willow touched the gold bluebell that still hung around her neck, thinking of that long-ago day when a reserved miner had spent his dollar not on a dance hall girl's practice charms, but on a glimpse of a seamstress's genuine smile. Vaughn looked up just then, catching her eye across the yard. Even after a decade of marriage, that simple connection still sent a flutter through her heart. He said something to Victor, then made his way to the porch, taking the steps 2 at a time. "What are you thinking about so seriously, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "About how it all began," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "With a smile and a dollar." He chuckled, the sound warm against her ear. "Best dollar I ever spent." "And all that gold you saved?" she teased. "Do you ever regret using it to buy the ranch instead of, I don't know, a fancy house in San Francisco or a trip to Europe?" Vaughn glanced around at their home, their land, their children. "Not for a single moment," he said with absolute conviction. "All the gold in Montana couldn't buy what we have here." As he lowered his head to kiss her, Willow knew he was right. The dance hall girls had wanted the Cowboy's gold, but he had spent his dollar on her first smile, and in doing so, had found a treasure beyond price.